Hello booktube, hello book friends, welcome back to my channel and another reading week update for the 19th of April 2025. So this is the video where I talk about the books that I've been reading in the last week, those that I've finished, those that I'm still reading, and if there were any DNFs. So this week has been pretty good. I think I mentioned a couple of books last week that I've been reading and have finished this week. So the first of those was this one, which is The Essential Terrance Dicks Volume 1, which is Doctor Who stories from the first three Doctors. So William Hartnell, Patrick Troughton, and John Pertwee. So the first three Doctors. I think one from the first Doctor, two I think from the second Doctor, and two from the third. Some that I have a vague memory of watching at some point, probably as repeats, because I think they were all pretty much before not necessarily before I was born, but certainly some of them probably were, but certainly before I was allowed to watch Doctor Who. And these were really great. This is like five stories. It's about 500 or so pages, and they're really fun. They're like 100 and a bit pages each, and they're just the telling of the they're the kind of novelizations of the stories that were shown on TV, and they're great. I mean, Terrance Dicks, probably one of the most famous writers of Doctor Who, and he could really tell a story. So I really enjoyed those. They were great fun. I've got volume 2 to read. I haven't started that yet. I thought I'd have a break in between. I also finished a book that I started last week, which was this one, which was A Natural History of Empty Lots by Christopher Brown. This is a non-fiction, strangely enough, natural history book, looking at all of the kind of habitat, wildlife, things that are going on in quite urban areas, and particularly around those sites or pieces of ground, lots that are sort of disused or are kind of vacant and haven't got any current use. It is. I really enjoyed it. I think it's probably a bit geeky. If natural history books aren't your sort of thing, then you probably wouldn't enjoy it. Some of the language was a bit flowery and a bit verbose, but it was still a good read. I still really enjoyed it. I just think it it let itself down in the writing rather than the telling of what wildlife was there. So this is completely sort of alien to me. We don't have things like coyotes and so on in this country, but they're a fairly major component in this. So this is Austin, Texas, in the US. So that was good. And I also finished Dispatches by Michael Hare. Now, this is part of my ongoing personal project to read books or read about conflict journalism, war correspondence, foreign correspondence, that sort of thing. This covers the Vietnam War, and it doesn't pull its punches. It really, I found this quite a hard read. I did almost consider putting it to one side, and then picking it up later. And I thought if I did that, I probably wouldn't pick it up again. I think it's kind of the sort of book I felt I needed to either finish, or I would DNF it. But I did finish it in the end. It is hard. It's interesting the way that the author, who is a journalist for Esquire magazine, gets kind of sucked into what's going on around him. I mean, he's obviously there as a journalist, not as a soldier, but he does very much pick up some of as a result of seeing all of the kind of horror and trauma, some of the ways that the soldiers themselves use to kind of blot it out. So, alcohol, drugs, that sort of thing. It's not an easy read. I am glad I finished it. But, compared to a lot of the other war correspondence accounts that I've read, this is probably the one. I mean, I'm not saying I think Vietnam as a war was pretty unique. It was sort of basically, a major superpower fighting, um, basically a guerrilla warfare, and not doing very well, despite the fact they've got all of the the weapons and kit and so on. It's not. I mean, it's not that straightforward, but for the sake of just describing what's going on. So yeah, I'm glad I read it. Glad I finished it, and I was going to read another book in relation to the Ukraine war. I'm going to skip that and possibly read it in May now, because I this is just kind of, it's not put me off the project, but I need a break from it. So and to that end, I went for something kind of completely different next. So the book I'm currently reading is apparently, according to the cover, the ultimate horror novel. And that is Stephen King's Pet Sematary. This is a reread. I read this originally, I think I was about 14, maybe a bit older, 14 years old, 14, 15, something like that. And this is actually the copy I had then. I know where I bought it. I bought it from the second-hand bookshop I was working in. And I have to say, I'm liking this a lot, and I think I'm liking it probably better than I did the first time around. So if you don't know the story, basically, family moves to a new house, discover that there is a pet cemetery where lots of people have kind of buried pets that have died, and it's on the property that they own, but it's kind of not theirs, if that makes sense. And various things then happen. Let's just leave it at that. I don't want to. If you haven't read it, I don't want to spoil the story. It's probably one of the Stephen King's better earlier books, I think. Even when I first read it, it was one of his better books. So yeah, so I'm reading that. Partly as a prelude to Horror Mayhem, partly as a prelude to reading You Like It Darker by Stephen King as a buddy read with Pat at Book Chat with Pat, and partly just to read something completely different from what I've been reading the rest of the month, to kind of, I dread to call it a palate cleanser because it's a horror novel. But yeah, so that's that. So what else have I been reading this week? That's it, I think. The only other thing that is happening, when this video goes out, this will be the 6-month anniversary of my starting my booktube channel, I think, as I mentioned last week, and I asked a call for questions for anything anybody would like to ask me. And Brian at Adventures in Literature asks, has your reading diet changed since joining booktube? I think the answer to that is yes. And there are two parts to that. So obviously, as I've just said, I've had my own channel for about 6 months. Prior to that, I was watching a lot of other booktube videos and other channels. And I think probably that, as much as anything else, changed my reading diet. So, I'm reading kind of much more fiction this year, it seems. Normally, my kind of prior to joining booktube, my kind of fiction non-fiction split was about 50-50. So far this year, it's about 25% non-fiction and 75% fiction. So I think I'm reading more fiction this year. Whether that will even out over the course of the year remains to be seen. I'm also reading authors that I've never read before. I think I'm reading slightly more classics than I read before, and certainly different authors of classics. But otherwise, I think I'm generally kind of discovering books in the same way as I always used to, just from reading other books, looking in bibliographies, certainly in terms of non-fiction, and then in terms of fiction, just all of the usual places, book reviews, social media campaigns, recommendations from people that I know have a similar reading interest to me. But yeah, I think it has changed. Certainly, I'm getting more input as a result of watching booktube. I'm not sure whether being on booktube itself has made that much difference, but I certainly think watching booktube has. So yeah, hope that answers the question, Brian. Thank you. And I think that's it for this week. So if you have been, thank you for watching, and I will speak to you again next time. Take care. Bye bye.